As I'm sure you all know, mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. But how did it get this nickname? What does it actually do? If you guessed that it makes energy for the cell, you're right, but it's how it makes this energy that's so interesting. There are three processes the cell uses to make ATP, the basic unit of energy for a cell: Krebs cycle and electron transport chain in the mitochondria, and glycolysis in the cytoplasm. Remember that glycolysis part, it'll be important for later. But before we get into how the mitochondria actually make energy, we first have to take a look at its structure. Mitochondria has four parts. First part is the outer membrane. It has a lot of pores in it, so it's easy to move small stuff in and out. Second part is the inner membrane space. It's filled with all the stuff the outer membrane lets in and a ton of protons. Remember that part too. The third part is a highly folded inner membrane. These folds are called cristae, and it's really good at keeping charged particles out. Final part is the matrix, the space inside the inner membrane, and that's where all the energy is actually produced. The outer membrane is porous, but mitochondria aren't that big. They can't let a molecule as big as glucose inside. So how do mitochondria make energy if they can't use glucose? Remember that glycolysis thing I mentioned earlier? Glycolysis splits a glucose molecule into two pyruvates and produces 2 ATP. We don't need to get too in depth about how it actually does this, but the main takeaways from glycolysis are that 1. Glycolysis splits a 6-carbon glucose into two 3-carbon pyruvates. 2. Mitochondria use pyruvates and oxygen to make energy. And 3. Glycolysis makes a hell of a lot less ATP than mitochondria do. Once these pyruvates enter the mitochondria, energy production can begin. There are two processes in the mitochondria that make energy: Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. Both of these processes remove a lot of protons and pump them into the intermembrane space. Since there's a way higher concentration of protons outside the inner membrane, the protons want to diffuse back into the matrix, but they can't get through the membrane. The only way they can get back inside is through a protein called ATP synthase. ATP synthase lets protons flow in, which causes some of its subunits to spin. Every time these subunits spin, an ATP molecule is produced. As long as the mitochondria has a steady supply of pyruvates and oxygen, it'll keep pumping protons into the intermembrane space. As long as there are protons in the intermembrane space, ATP synthase will keep churning out energy for the cell. I didn't go into too much detail about how glycolysis, Krebs cycle, and electron transport chain actually work. Each of those will eventually get their own videos since they have a lot of moving parts. But the important things to take away from this video are that 1. Mitochondria are double membrane organelles that produce ATP. 2. Mitochondria need oxygen and pyruvates to produce energy. 3. Mitochondria rely a lot on glycolysis to make pyruvates since they can't directly use glucose. And 4. Krebs cycle and electron transport chain make more than 15 times as much energy as glucose.